Hello everybody, welcome to part 17 of the Star Wars Legends Chronological Review Series. Today we are reaching the climax of the stories of Ulic Qel-Droma, Exar Kun, and Nomi Sunrider with the penultimate Tales of the Jedi comic arc titled The Sith War. Looks like it's going to be a crazy ride, so let's buckle up, power on our hyperdrives, and dive straight into it. 6 months after Ulic Qel-Droma and Exar Kun have joined forces as the official Dark Lords of the Sith, they've entrenched themselves in the city of Sinagar on the planet Empress Teta, and have each gone deeper along their Darth paths, hoping to soon take on the Republic head-on. However, other powers have sought to challenge their hold over the Empress Teta system. Attracted by the chaos of the recent conflict, the ancient warrior clans of Mandalore, united by their leader, Mandalore the Indomitable, target the carbonite foundries of the system, hoping to start a war for their own personal glory. Though the Krath's antique weapons are no match for the Mandalorian war droids, Ulic demands Mandalore surrenders. Instead, Mandalore challenges Ulic to a man-to-man duel on his own world of Harkul. After a furious duel, Mandalore is defeated, and Ulic now holds the loyalty of both the Krath and the Mandalorian armies. On the Jedi world of Ossus, Exar Kun has come to evangelize to the other Jedi, claiming that he has access to ancient Jedi knowledge and that he succeeded in defeating Frida Nad where his old masters failed. Elsewhere at the Jedi grounds, Nomi receives instructions from Odin about battle meditation. Odin tells Nomi that the most powerful light side ability that exists is to completely block an opponent's ability to use the Force, perhaps permanently, with an impenetrable wall of light. After Odin sends Nomi off, Exar Kun confronts the Old Master and kills him, taking his Sith holocron. At the Great Republic shipyard at the planet Forast, Ulic launches a devastating attack using Sith illusions, Taytan soldiers, and Mandalorian warriors, capturing the schematics for the Republic's newest warships. Exar communicates with Ulic via hologram, informing Ulic that he has recruited 20 new Jedi from Ossus to their cause. Though Exar wants to build up their forces slowly and gradually, Ulic grows impatient, and he and Mandalore prepare to attack Coruscant. Starting issue 2, the Republic investigates the ruins of a space station that was attacked by the Krath. They uncover a message that implicates Ulic as their leader, and confirming a rumor that a Jedi has been involved in the recent attacks on the Republic. The Jedi come to Coruscant to discuss the situation with the Senate, but as soon as they arrive, Ulic's forces bear down hard on the galactic capital. His message at the space station, which was planted, suggested an attack at the faraway Chemplex 9, ensuring the Republic would divert their main defenses far from Coruscant. Ulic and his forces carve their way to the Republic war room, but suddenly, Alima betrays Ulic by telling Mandalore to evacuate, leaving Ulic to deal with the Jedi all by himself. Sensing Ulic's presence, Nomi, Kay, and the other Jedi confront Ulic in the war room, and they all concentrate their power to create a wall of light, imprisoning Ulic and temporarily disabling his force powers. Across the galaxy, Exar Kun takes his new students to Yavin 4 to begin their dark training. The students generally seem pretty doubtful about Exar's claims of hidden power, and they sense the presence of the dark side. Claiming that he needs their help to purify Yavin 4 for the light side, Exar smashes the Sith holocron, releasing ancient Sith spirits that possess the bodies of the new students. Beginning issue 3, we see that Alima is in full control of the Krath forces and is dealing with those who are still loyal to Ulic. Mandalore, however, starts to doubt that Alima is really telling the truth, as he does not believe that his forces were defeated and Ulic captured so easily. Alima instructs Mandalore to send their forces to Chemplex 9 in a double feint. Though he carries out her orders to the letter, he vows to find a way to still serve Ulic, as that's where his true loyalty still lies. At Yavin 4, Exar Kun plans his own offensive with his possessed Dark Jedi students. He commands them to go out and strike down their old Jedi masters. Mandalore arrives at the Jungle Moon, asking for Exar's help in freeing Ulic from Coruscant, where he is currently standing trial. Much to the dismay of his old Jedi friends, Ulic refuses to repent for his crimes to the Senate, instead asserting that there is no room for the Republic in the galaxy's coming Golden Age. Just as Cade arrives to take the stand to try and defend his brother, Exar Kun and Mandalore march into the Senate. After Exar and Ulic make a grand speech about how the Republic is now ineffective and useless, and that they plan a galactic rebirth, Master Vodo Siosk Bask emerges to try and stop his old student. The two fight ferociously, with Master Boss refusing Exar's demand that he join him to learn the ways of the Sith. Exar defeats and kills Master Boss, but he hears an echo from his old master, reminding Exar that he once sensed an empty place in his heart unseen, from which no light escapes. Going on to issue 4, Ulic and the others depart from Coruscant, and Mandalore informs Ulic of Alima's betrayal. Nomi takes a visit to Ambria, the homeworld of Master Thrawn, to recover from her recent experience and claim some time for peace and contemplation. However, they can't escape evil for long, as Osweilam, who is possessed by one of Exar Kun's Sith spirits, has arrived to kill Master Thrawn. Fortunately, the Jedi rally and are able to fend him off, but across the galaxy, Exar's other students find themselves far more successful in striking down their masters. At the Great Temple on Yavin 4, Ulic and Exar plan their attack on Chemplex 9. Ulic allows Alima to lead the attack, preparing to betray her in turn. Alima takes Naga Sadow's ancient ship to the battle, using the ship's ability to harness the power of the suns against the Republic forces. Sadow's ship tears out the radioactive core from one of the stars, obliterating the Jedi and Republic fighters instantly in a white-hot flash. However, this creates a chain reaction that causes the entire star to implode, and Alima realizes Ulic's ultimate plan far too late. Starting issue 5, the stellar shockwave from the battle is so great that it's bound to reach Ossus, and the Jedi launch an evacuation of their temple. Taking advantage of the situation, Ulic and Exar go to the defenseless world to strip it of the ancient Jedi knowledge, and the Mandalorian warships have a devastating effect on the Jedi evacuation. Kay finds Ulic and pursues him in his starship, still refusing to let his brother slip away from the light side. Meanwhile, Exar Kun lands on the planet to capture some Jedi artifacts. Exar battles the tree-like Master Ood, and the Master grows enormously to protect a sacred trove of Jedi lightsabers. Exar is also confronted by Silvar the Cathar, one of his former Jedi peers and the mate to Credo, whom Exar had corrupted and sent to die in the Starflash battle. However, Exar doesn't even consider Silvar worth his time, and he leaves her to battle his Massassi warriors. In the midst of battle, Ulic and Kay crash on the planet's surface. Kay tearfully confronts his brother one last time, hoping that he can save Ulic from himself. Ultimately, however, as Kay pleads for Ulic to not waste Master Arca's sacrifice, Ulic strikes down his brother to silence him for good. Realizing his horrible mistake too late, Ulic tearfully embraces his dying brother, left alone in his shock and horror. Moving on to the 6th and final issue, Nobi discovers Ulic and Kay. Determined that Ulic must face the consequences for his actions, she uses Odin Ur's Wall of Light technique to permanently isolate Ulic from the Force. Though he's forever reduced from what he once was, Ulic rallies with his old Jedi allies to challenge Exar Kun once and for all on Yavin 4. As they depart Ossus, the shockwave finally reaches the planet, raising its surface and everything on it, including Master Ood. At Yavin 4, thousands of Jedi from across the galaxy converge for a final battle against Exar Kun. Exar, knowing that he simply cannot overcome the might of all of the Jedi, prepares to use Sith power to survive by other means. Summoning all of the planet's Massassi to the Great Temple, Exar enacts a Sith ritual to absorb the Massassi's life force and allow his spirit to run rampant across the cosmos forever. The Jedi defeat the remaining Sith forces with a combined wall of light, and they leave Yavin 4 as the jungle moon engulfs in flames. Across the galaxy, the Mandalorians, who are still loyal to Ulic, begin assaulting the city of Isis on Onderon based on Ulic's old orders. However, when the Republic reinforcements arrive, the outmatched Mandalorians flee into the jungles of the moon of Zun. Mandalore is ambushed and killed by the wild beasts of the moon, and while looking for their missing leader, one of the Mandalorian soldiers finds Mandalore's helmet, claiming himself to be the new Mandalore. 2 years after the defeat of Exar Kun, Ulic Qel-Droma flies his new ship, named Kay's Dream, to Yavin 4. Longing to be forgiven as a Jedi and reclaim his powers to be used for good, Ulic hopes to discover what exactly Exar did to himself on the moon, but still, his connection to the Force is severed and he finds nothing for him there. However, in the darkness, the spirit of Exar Kun shouts out into the night, pleading for Ulic, begging him not to leave, but he receives no response. So, I'm going to take the time now to encourage you guys that if you're not reading these comics alongside me with these series, for this one at least, please do. I know I do like the plot summaries as just part of my routine with this series, because I know I do my plot summaries as like part of my routine for this series, because one of my big goals for this series is to catch people up or inform them on Star Wars lore in case they don't want to read everything. But for Tales of the Jedi, at least, I absolutely encourage you to read this whole series all the way through. It's just, for this story, it feels like it's especially hard to do it justice, because not only is it really essential for the lore going forward, but I feel like it also just really does a good job of being just a good story that encapsulates a lot of Star Wars' best themes. So this story, you know, as you can probably tell, exceeded my expectations. It gets so dark and so big and so epic, I think, in the best ways that Star Wars can really be. I have to say, I was like stunned when Ulic killed his brother. Like, I know it's just a comic, but I sat there looking at the page, the panel, and I was just like, wow. I mean, I really can't think of a better way for Ulic's journey of darkness to end and for him to really like truly face the consequences of everything he had done up until that point. It's just, this hit me especially hard. You know, mostly most of my emotional reaction from Star Wars will come from the TV shows or the movies especially, but like as someone who grew up with a little brother and we would play Star Wars together, you know, seeing this happen in a Star Wars story where two brothers are Jedi and the older one falls to the dark side, and for his dark side journey to end when he kills his little brother and discovers everything that he's done, like that hits. It really does. Exar Kun, the end of his story was also done really well, super satisfying. I think it was great for him to die kind of horrifically by one of his own Sith rituals. It's exactly the kind of Faustian Devil's Deal death that I really had in mind for him to be completely consumed by his search for power and immortality, and for him to not be happy about it in the end. I always think that this kind of end, they got what they wanted, they got eternal life, but it ends up being torturous. I think that is the best kind of Star Wars death for characters like Exar Kun or Palpatine. And those final few panels where he's calling out for Ulic in the darkness is like really just haunting. It's a fate worse than death, and you gotta say he earned it. The Mandalorians, especially, you know, the Mandalore, were absolutely like the breakout surprise stars of this arc. I said last time when they brought up Mandalorian Iron that I didn't expect the Mandalorians or anything relating to them to pop up in this comic, and then in the next arc they come back about as big as they can be. It feels like almost every arc in these Tales of the Jedi comics bring in some new faction or character, some kind of wild card that really shakes up the plot, and it just adds so much to the story, and I'm always so impressed and amazed at how well these Tales of the Jedi stories actually make use of all their disparate elements and really tie in everything together and tie in every loose end, because sometimes like a long Star Wars story doesn't always do that. It doesn't always tie up all of its loose ends in such a satisfactory way. The Mandalorian plot thread did kind of end on a cliffhanger, but I'm assuming that that's going to get picked up in the Knights of the Old Republic storylines, given how much I hear about the Mandalorians and the Mandalorian Wars. But there's no way that they could have predicted that all of that would happen 10 years later after they were writing the comics. So, you know, this era, I think, is really surprising me with how much it really uses and synthesizes all of its elements, not only lore-wise, but like thematically as well. I'm sorry, but Ulic challenging Mandalore to a duel and earning his loyalty, and for Mandalore to maintain that loyalty to Ulic even after he gets betrayed, is just so cool. Everybody needs a ride or die friend like Mandalore. Guys will really see this and go, hell yeah. So yeah, again, I never thought that we were going to see Mandalorians this early in the timeline, but we did end up meeting them in our first ever video in the form of the Tongs, and I'm just very pleasantly surprised to see the Mandalorians already solidified into their own very distinct warrior culture that has significant impact on the events of the Star Wars galaxy this early in the timeline. I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell in my research if this was like the first real expansion on Mandalorian lore since like Boba Fett's introduction in the original trilogy. I don't know if there are some original trilogy era comics that expand on Boba Fett's lore in quite this big of a way. But again, it's amazing that even by the 90s, how much of the core ideas of Mandalorians as a culture have already taken root. And it's just, they have this aesthetic that's still so recognizable as Mandalorian, but fits so well into the stylized style of Tales of the Jedi. It's just the icing on the cake. Plus, I find it super interesting that a lot of the Mandalorians aren't even human. They look like they're a part of the Tong species. I don't know if that's a retcon or if this is like the first appearance of the Tongs and they just kind of worked it into Mandalorian lore later, but that's a great touch as well. Already having callbacks to the very first piece of media that we reviewed on this series is a great treat, and it just makes me love this the Sith War even more. Yeah, so overall I am really happy with where all of the characters and the themes end up at this point in the story. I'm pretty happy that Alima went out the way that she did, how she kind of took a backseat in the story as the story began to focus on Exar and Ulic. I'm not surprised that she betrayed Ulic, and I'm happy that she went out the way that she did with Ulic kind of catching on. You know, her death wasn't as dramatic or as like karmic as Exar's was, but I'm pretty happy with how it went still. I do definitely wish that Nomi had a little bit more to do. I think her overall evolution throughout the series is still really good, and she got the bulk of her development kind of in her first little comic arc that she was back during the Beast Wars. And I think her overall development as someone who develops these very powerful yet non-violent light side abilities is a very interesting way to take her character, and is a great way for that to kind of bring an end to Ulick's story. I just feel like that she's the epitome of kind of this pacifist Jedi philosophy of nonviolence that sometimes gets a little bit lost when you have this story of epic heroes who have all these political machinations and lightsaber battles. Sometimes the most powerful one on the field isn't the one who's going to raise a lightsaber. Overall, I just really love the kind of freedom that you can feel the writers had when writing this big story. You know, there weren't any movies or books or games before in this era that restricted what the writers had to do. Back then, we only had the original trilogy, the Marvel Comics, the Thrawn trilogy, and Dark Empire was coming out around this time, if memory serves me correctly. And those are just happen around or behind or ahead of like the original trilogy by like 5 years or so. This is thousands of years in the past, and they just had, you know, I know they like collaborated with George Lucas and made sure that, you know, everything they did felt right and didn't contradict the prequels or anything, but like they were just allowed to gain so much momentum that it felt like that every single story had this huge impact on the galactic, you know, time scale and history and lore in this way. Like, think of how the storyline started with the Beast Wars of Onderon, where Ulick is just like just any other kind of cocky young Jedi guy, and then it just blooms into this huge story about falling to the dark side and bringing all these characters. We got Sith, you know, spirits, we got Exar Kun, we have the Mandalorians coming in, we have dark side cults, and it all started with this story of just a Jedi and his brother and his friends on an assignment on some planet, and how it eventually weaved together all of its elements and resolved them each one by one, and then they all came together in this really satisfying way. It's just really good. I really feel attached to this period of the Star Wars timeline. Like, I know a lot of people like the Knights of the Old Republic timeline, you know, which takes place like 30 years in the future, but I haven't gotten to that yet, and I really like the thing that actually came before it that set up a lot of the background for that, and I wonder if I'm gonna feel the same way with this upcoming stuff. So yeah, overall, the art is fantastic, the battles continue to be spectacular, the galactic stakes are super high, the emotional journeys are compelling, and they all end great. We get all kinds of callbacks to Star Wars lore from earlier in the saga and earlier in the series. I mean, this really is Star Wars at its most ambitious, at its most fantastical, at its cheesiest, at its pulpiest, at its most outrageous, and its most soul-wrenching, genuinely, and I really do love it. I mean, 5 out of 5. Actually, no, 6 out of 5. 6 Mandalorian masks out of 5. Genuinely, I loved it that much. I don't know how you guys feel, but I'm feeling very rewarded by reviewing Star Wars chronologically in this way, and I think that this is my favorite story so far that we've encountered in this series. So while we're still here, let's go ahead and review a couple of odds and ends from this part of the Star Wars timeline to kind of unpack everything that we have just witnessed with the Sith War. Our next piece of media is another The Old Republic timeline video in which the Jedi scholar Nost Dural kind of recounts the events of the Great Sith War a few centuries after it occurred, sometime around 3685 BBY. This video doesn't really tell us anything that we don't already know, considering we've just read the comics that this is recapping, but if you want like a 5-minute overview of the events, especially regarding how the Sith War leads into the upcoming Mandalorian Wars, which then escalates and relates to the characters and events prevalent in both Knights of the Old Republic and the Old Republic MMO, then this might be a worthwhile watch. It seems that some of these Old Republic timeline trailers give us some new information, while others just kind of retell events of certain stories for the benefits of players that are about to play that game. So the final piece we're going to be looking at today is another recording from the Essential Guide to the Force, and this one is titled the Tolaris Shim recording. I'm assuming it's named after the Jedi who recorded it. So Tolaris Shim is a Jedi contemporary of Ulick Qel-Droma who wrote about Ulick Qel-Droma's fall to the dark side shortly after the end of the Great Sith War. Basically, she explains how Jedi are even capable of falling to the dark side in the first place, and she lays out this like 4-stage process for how she believes most or all Jedi fall to the dark side. And she believes that all Jedi need to thoroughly understand this process in order to avoid it. So step 1 is temptation. Because Jedi have supernatural force abilities, Jedi may be tempted to use these abilities hastily, but those that do so in impatience or aggression may find themselves straying towards a dark path. Step 2 is imperilment. A Jedi is imperiled to stay on the dark path if they are indecisive on committing themselves fully to the light side. With the dark side, basically once you start, it's pretty hard to stop. The third step is submission. Once a Jedi truly starts along the dark path, they may find that the dark side feels very liberating or even exhilarating when they give in fully to it, and they no longer feel that they have to justify their actions, which makes them a proper dark Jedi. At this point, it's the responsibility of the Jedi's allies to either stop them or bring them back to the light. Step 4 is atonement or redemption. A Jedi who is merely tainted by the dark side can achieve atonement through meditation, reflection, and absolution, but a full Dark Jedi must perform a selfless act of heroism without calling upon the dark side to be considered redeemed. So one thing I really like about really all of the excerpts from the Essential Guide to the Force is that they really provide some fantastic additional context and understanding for not only these comic stories, but like the whole Star Wars saga. The Force isn't real, and people in real life don't really become evil in a process that's very similar to falling towards the dark side in Star Wars. So to have these kind of psychological processes that are tied to this supernatural force, having it explained in plain English really helps me wrap my head around it more, even though I've been watching these movies basically the entire time I've been alive. And of course, this whole 4-step dark side process thing is very much foreshadowing or even blatantly referencing mainly Anakin's fall and his eventual redemption. You know, he grows up knowing that he's powerful, he tries to use this power to help the people he cares about, and so he tries to make shortcuts through the dark side to help these people, only to eventually be left with nothing but the dark side. And years later, he can only really be considered redeemed by doing a selfless act for someone that doesn't involve using the dark side at all. Maybe you don't need to read these little excerpts if you watched every Star Wars movie and understood every psychological aspect of it the very first time, but for me, I think little excerpts from this book really just enhance whatever comics I just read, and they really benefit my understanding of the franchise as a whole, and it's really nice. Alright guys, that's it for part 17, but if you thought that we were done with Ulic and Nomi, we aren't just yet, as there's one more Tales of the Jedi arc that we need to cover, titled Tales of the Jedi Redemption, and it serves as a kind of epilogue to the story of Ulic. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that. Thank you for watching. May the Force be with you always.